Joel Wade, a psychotherapist and life coach in Santa Cruz, California, consults with business on culture issues focused on improving trust, communication, and well-being, offers workshops and seminars on mastering happiness. I can't think of a better title or a better subject. Centered around cutting-edge research in the field of positive psychology, and he has several decades of experience as a therapist, coach, and teacher. He's author of Mastering Happiness. I think most of these are on the out on the bookstore, so you can pick them up. Mastering Happiness, 10 Principles for Practicing a More Fulfilling Life, a pocket guide to mastering happiness, and a children's book, The Sand People of the Kalahari, based on Wade's first contact in 1988 with a band of sand hunter-gatherers in the Kalahari Desert. He regularly writes for the Daily Bell, the To the Point News, and has contributed to the New Individualist and the American Thinker. He enjoys, I think his great strength is making these principles extremely clear, simple, and easy to apply. And I've had the pleasure of having Joel see his session last year, but also had Joel speak to a group in the New Orleans region, and he was just terrific, not only speak, but work as a coach. So he has a terrific style and a terrific ability to really engage people in an open and clear way. So with that, it is a pleasure to introduce Joel Wade.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, everybody. I want to talk today about what it actually takes to make positive change in your life. Not some idealistic vision or wishful thinking about having everything perfect, but what it actually takes to make things happen. There are lots of reasons why we might want to make changes. You might have situations where it's just too painful to keep doing what you're doing. There might be something that's too delightful to pass up, and you have to make some changes in order to do it. You can have an epiphany and all of a sudden understand things in a way that you hadn't before. You might be inspired by a great work of literature, say. I imagine one or two of you might have had that experience, where you read something and it changes how you think about things. We can also be influenced by other people, of course, in our circumstances. Since we're talking about positive change, it's usually people that are allies or people that care about us, that are wanting the best for us. I'm a marriage and family therapist and a life coach, and I've spent my career helping people to make positive changes in their life. But I don't make the changes in their life. And none of these things actually change you. They change your stance, and they change your motivation and what you want to do. But the actual change that you make in your life is very personal, and it's very unique to each one of us. And the bottom line is it takes work. Even if you've had an epiphany or really understand things differently, the work of integrating what you've learned is substantial, because basically you get good at whatever you practice. So if you've been practicing your whole life being a rotten listener and not having much empathy for people, you're going to get really good at that. If you practice procrastinating and putting things off till the last minute, you're going to get really good at that. If you practice really listening to people and trying to understand where they're coming from, you'll get good at that. You can practice certain things that I can almost guarantee you will make you depressed if you practice them enough. And in fact, if you're at my talk tomorrow, if you just take those in and do the opposite, you'll probably get really good at being depressed and miserable. So these are all skills and habits that you develop. And the change takes changing your habits, practicing certain skills until they become habits. And you want your habits to work for you. Now there's a reason why I have on my book here my daughter's hands on the piano. And it's not just because I love my daughter and I love hearing her play piano. And it's not, and this isn't a book on music. I have that picture there because the process of changing, of learning skills to live a happier life, are no different fundamentally from learning any other skill, like playing piano or learning how to do a particular job well. It takes practice, and it takes more practice, and it takes using your will, and it takes certain things that can help that along. And that's what I want to talk about this morning, is some of the processes that are involved in making actual change in your life. The first step, as I see it, is self-acceptance. And by self-acceptance, I don't mean that anything goes and this is just how I am, so everyone else has to deal with it. By self-acceptance, I mean looking at the truth of your life right now and accepting that what's true is true. So what are your circumstances? What are your skills that you've developed? What have you done in your life up to this point? What's the state of your relationships and your work? What's actually true right now? You don't have to like it. You don't have to think that it's going to be this way forever. But you do have to accept it and orient yourself to reality. And it's very much like those maps that you see in a shopping mall or a college campus. And there's usually a big red arrow that says, you are here. And that orients you to what's true right now. I'm right here. And if you know that, and you know where you want to get to, you can plot a course to get there. If you don't have that, if you find a map and they don't have that arrow there, you can wander around for a long time. And maybe you'll get to where you want to go, maybe not. So self-acceptance is really about just acknowledging and accepting what's true. It also involves a quality of kindness and compassion towards yourself. And this is very much Nathaniel Branden's formulation of self-acceptance. Now you might have done things in your life that you feel ashamed of or you feel regretful for. Those emotions serve a purpose. They let you know that you've done something that violates your values, or you've done something that you don't want to repeat again. So the point isn't to dwell on those feelings and beat yourself up over what you've done in the past. The point is to take in the message that those feelings are telling you. And if you need to do something to make amends for what you've done, do that. But mostly you want to focus on what do I need to do now so I don't keep repeating those things. So I don't keep doing the things that hurt me in the past. So that's part of why a quality of kindness and compassion is important to yourself. It's also important just practically, because how many times have you responded well to somebody attacking you and calling you names? Has that been effective in your life to make change? Probably not. So that stance of kindness toward yourself is also kind of a strategy that will help you move forward more easily. There's another element of self-acceptance that isn't talked about too often, and that is the quality of temperament. Now, you might be familiar with the Myers-Briggs. Myers-Briggs is fine for what it is, but there's researchers, Alexander Thomas and Stella Chess, that have done a longitudinal study, the New York longitudinal study, where they identify 9 different temperament styles. And I find their work much more interesting and useful. And what they've found is there are certain qualities of behavior that we come into the world with and tend to endure throughout a lifetime. I want to stress that that doesn't mean that they're rigid and like fingerprints or eye color, that it's just, that's how it is, and just face the facts. This is how you're always going to be. They are malleable, but one person might have stronger feelings, one person might have more subdued feelings. One person might have a need for a lot of physical activity, another person might be comfortable being more sedentary. One person might be very comfortable with novelty, with new situations. Another person's more kind of held back and doesn't like to enter new situations. It's a little anxious with new people. So in terms of your temperament, the important thing is to understand what your tendencies are and accept that it might be more difficult for you to do certain things. Not that you can't do them, but just to prepare yourself that this might be more challenging for you than for somebody else. So you might be sedentary, but you want to be an athlete. You can do that. It's just going to not come as natural to you as somebody that's naturally physical and just doesn't have to think about it. What I'm doing right now is not natural to me. I'm by temperament kind of moderately averse to new situations and new people, and being up on stage is not something that I would just naturally be drawn to. But years ago I decided I wanted to learn how to do it, and that I liked meeting new people and I liked new situations. And so there's things you can do to practice it, and now I enjoy it very, very much. So the idea isn't that your temperament is your destiny, but it is something that you have to accept and deal with and work with in your process of getting to where you want to go. Okay, so now you have a sense that you're inspired to make some changes. You've oriented to what's true about yourself right now. And so now the process can begin. And let me talk a little bit about your thinking and how your thinking affects the process of change. Carol Dweck and others have done some research on what they call mindsets, which is basically how we think about our experience and how we think about ourselves in relation to certain situations. And it's based in cognitive psychology. But I want to talk about two particular mindsets that she has researched. A trait or a fixed trait mindset and a growth mindset. Now, in research that she's done with kids, what she found is kids that think of themselves in terms of traits, in terms of fixed qualities like intelligence or talent or giftedness, when kids have been praised mostly for those kinds of things, they do fine with a moderate challenge, but when things are more challenging, they don't do so well. They tend to give up easily, they tend to avoid challenges, and they tend not to bounce back very well from adversity. And so these are people that end up being kind of underachievers because they don't lean into situations. And if you think about it, it makes sense, because if I'm supposedly really smart and then I do poorly on a test, how do I make sense out of that? It's not immediately obvious that, well, I just need to study more. I'm smart. This is a test. I'm supposed to do well on tests. So instead of it being just a matter of, okay, what do I need to do? It becomes a matter of my entire self-concept being questioned. The whole idea of how intelligent I am gets thrown into doubt. And that's not a very pleasant place to be. The other mindset is a growth-oriented mindset. And this is very much centered on what you do. So kids that are praised for the work that they do, what they do with their gifts. Oh, I love what you've done with your music. You practice a lot and you really applied yourself to this, and you did so well on your audition because of that. Or you did great on the test. I saw how hard you were studying and how much work you put into that. So when kids are given that kind of feedback, they tend to embrace challenges more because it's fun. You don't have that much to lose. If you go into a challenge and you don't do so well, you work harder next time and you can do better next time. So it makes it kind of fun. So they lean into challenges more. They they deal with adversity better, they bounce back more easily from adversity, and they'll tend to stick with things. If things are hard, they'll stick with them longer. So I'm talking about the research with kids because if you have kids or deal with kids, it's something to be aware of. You'll support them more if you focus on their actions rather than a fixed trait. And this, of course, can be negative. You can think of yourself as a failure as opposed to I didn't do well on that. So the child psychologist Chaim Ginott, who wrote Between Parents and Child years ago, talked about this. When you're correcting a child, say your son or daughter knocks over a glass of milk. You don't say, "Oh, you're so clumsy." You say, "Oh, looks like you spilt the milk. Here's a rag." And then they can clean it up. And then it's about the action they took. It's not about their character. It's not something personal about their essential self. And then it's something they can work with. They're not helpless in the face of it. So now that's with kids, but as adults, we usually are a mix of this. We have certain things that we think of ourselves in terms of traits, certain things that are more dynamic and that we think in terms of a growth mindset. For example, you might think, well, I'm not good at languages. And that's something that I was doing personally. And it didn't matter too much because I'm not involved with speaking foreign languages. It's not a high priority until my kids started learning languages. And there they are having conversations in Latin with each other, and they're really good at it, and they love it, and they're doing it all the time. And my daughter's teasing me because I can't roll my R's, and it's so easy, Dad. Why can't you roll your R's? And you just go, and I'm going, and then I thought about it, and I said, wait a minute, how many hours have they spent studying languages? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours studying it, playing with it, enjoying it. How many hours have I spent studying language? Well, almost nothing. So why in the world would I be good at language at this point? I haven't applied myself. So what I'd like to suggest that you do, and this comes back to self-acceptance in a way, is begin to notice how you think about certain things, particularly the things you want to grow in. And notice if you have sort of a fixed trait mindset about it. And what I suggest people do is think of this kind of like you're watching a nature show. Here's this pride of lions over there. Let's get a closer look. But you're not trying to change the lions or make judgments about the lions. You're just watching them and seeing what they do. In the same sense, just watch what you naturally do. Do you naturally think of yourself in terms of fixed traits for a given thing, or more in terms of the actions that you take or don't take? And then if you do that, you can change your mindset. You first identify what it is, and then what you do is you dispute it, just like I showed you with the language. Now, if this was important to me, if this is a high value to me to learn languages, the next step is to act from a growth mindset. And I would just begin studying language. I'd just begin practicing. After a while, I could roll those stupid R's if I just practiced it. So, another element of your thinking that can either hinder you or help you in making positive change is the meaning that you make of your experience. Now, psychology has spent a lot of time and energy and has affected our culture quite a bit, getting people to focus on negative, painful events of your past, particularly your childhood. And this goes back to Freud and a lot of different theories of psychotherapy. And it can be useful to look at what happened in your past. I wouldn't suggest that you deny things that happened in your past, but it's important to understand that your memories especially of your childhood, are probably not very accurate. Because you're not remembering events, you're remembering the meaning that you made of those events at the time. And you particularly made sense of them from a child's cognitive and emotional and interpersonal understanding. So you might have had an experience of your dad being very maybe short and grumpy with you. And the meaning you made of that is, well, Dad didn't love me very much. He didn't care about me very much. But what you didn't know was Dad was having a really hard time with his business and barely keeping it afloat in some hard times. And he and your mom were having a hard time with each other with some conflicts. And Dad was just grumpy. And it had nothing to do with you. He loved you and cared about you. He was just grumpy at the time. But as a child, you might see that and take it personally. We tend to take things very personally, whether they are or not. So then you get this memory of, and this whole self-concept around, well, Dad didn't really care about me very much, when it really wasn't the true facts. It may have been, maybe that was the truth, but maybe it wasn't. You don't really know. What you know is the meaning that you made of those memories. So, first of all, I want you to think of your past painful, hurtful memories as something that's not as objective fact as you might think. And this is not trivial, and it's not some kind of postmodern muddying of objective reality. This is how we organize our thoughts and our experience. And so let me tell, and if you have mostly a painful sense of your past, that doesn't give you as strong a foundation as you can have to move forward and make positive changes. Now, how many people here have pictures on your wall? Pictures of your family, pictures of experiences you've had, trips you've taken. When you chose those pictures to put on your wall, did you pick the most difficult times, the most painful, awful experiences in your life, and hang those up on your wall? How many people did that? We'll talk afterwards. But that's exactly what we do inside our mind. For some reason, we tend to remember painful things and unfinished things more easily than the positive things. And so if you think about the images in your own mind, there's probably not that many more than you have on your wall. There's certain experiences that you kind of pop back to when you think of mom or dad or the house you lived in. There's a certain number of images that you go back to. And for the most part, you probably didn't choose those. Those are things that you just kind of remember. So what I want to suggest is that you have a choice about what's hanging in your gallery. But it's not so easy just to say, well, let's take these pictures down and put up some new ones, because they're probably stuck on there for earthquake, and you've practiced going back to those a lot. So the way to do this is to look at your past in a different way. Now, in my business, sometimes we think of going back and digging into painful memories as going on an archaeological dig. But rather than going on an archaeological dig, I want to suggest that you go on a treasure hunt. And look in your past for the people and the events that you can feel grateful about. Think of the people in your life that have loved you, have cared about you, have been your allies, the people that have believed in you, and maybe have pushed you a little bit, or maybe shoved you a lot into doing things that they knew you could do, but you weren't quite so sure of. Think of those people in your life and begin to search around for them, because they're there. And they might have been very prominent people in your past, or they might have been somebody that you had really very little interaction, but the interaction mattered. And begin to collect those memories and those feelings and those times. And if you keep practicing that over time, you'll find that the pictures in your gallery begin to change. And you begin to think more and more in terms of of the positive influences in your life and the people that cared about you in your life. And what that does is it gives you a foundation of positive resource, emotional and psychological resource, that makes it easier to move forward into positive change. So, now let's talk about willpower, because you're going to need it. And David did a wonderful job yesterday, talked about some of the things I'm going to be talking about here. And one of my favorite people in psychology, Roy Baumeister, who's done some wonderful research on self-regulation and willpower and a lot of things that research psychologists have avoided because they're kind of controversial, or he's gotten attacked for some of the things he's researched. But one of the things he's talked about is willpower. And there's, as David talked about, willpower takes energy. It takes actual physical energy. And so you want to have a diet that's good, not just cookies, and not just radishes either, though you want a lot of veggies. You want to have a good level of glucose in your bloodstream, basically, to draw from. And it takes rest. You want to make sure you're getting enough rest, because willpower works very much like a muscle. And building your willpower is very much like building your physical capacity. If you start doing physical exercise, you get fatigued after a while, and you have to stop and rest. And then the next day you do some more. And over time, if you keep practicing it, you get fatigued less easily and less quickly. And you get more strength and endurance over time as you practice it. So willpower is something that you can practice and strengthen. And you do that by applying it. If you don't have much to begin with, you apply it in very specific ways, in very tangible, very concrete ways. When our kids were little, we'd tell them, go clean your room. And then we'd go to their room about an hour later, and they're sitting there and they've done something, but they haven't been cleaning their room. And if you've seen our kids' rooms, you know it's pretty obvious. So then we started saying, okay, Jesse, go to your room, pick up all the dirty clothes that are all over the place, all over your floor and everywhere, and bring it to the laundry room. And put all your clean clothes away in the drawers in the closet. And take the books on your desk and organize them onto your shelves. And then we go back an hour later. The dirty clothes are off of the floor and in the laundry room. Clean clothes are put away. And the books are mostly kind of sort of organized on the shelf. When you practice things like that, it transfers to other areas of your life. So the practice of self-discipline and willpower in one area transfers to other areas. And it grows your general capacity for willpower and self-discipline. Now, Carol Dweck has also done some work on willpower and kind of disputes Baumeister's idea that willpower gets depleted. But really through their conflict, what I think has come of it is, yes, willpower, there are limitations to it and you want to be aware of it. But you can also power through it when you have to. If you have a situation where you really need to get something done, you don't have to feel like, well, yes, but I've used my quota of willpower for today. I need to rest now. But I have a deadline at midnight tonight. Yes, but I need to, we're not that wimpy about it. We can really push through things when you have to. So the understanding of fatigue and willpower is just something to know in a general way, so you can practice this and build it up over time. But you can also push through, and you can also get things done if you have to in bursts. It's just important as a long-term strategy to know what it takes. So You've decided you want to change. You've decided that you've oriented yourself to reality. You know what you are dealing with in your life. You know where you stand now in your life. You've taken some time to understand your temperament and how, well, it might be more difficult for me than somebody else to do this particular thing I would like to do. Okay, I'm up for that. I'm up for that challenge. You've taken some time to look at your mindsets. You've taken your time some time to kind of watch yourself and pay attention to how you think about yourself in terms of fixed traits or growth. And you've taken some steps to change your mindset when you find that that's getting in the way. And then you're thinking in terms of the positive memories of your past, the meaning that you make out of the events of your life and your present events as well. And you've done some things to begin to build up your emotional and psychological resources. And then you think in terms of how you use your willpower. You can focus, you can decide, I'm going to take this particular path in my life. And I'm going to focus my intent and focus my self-discipline toward these goals. So now what do you do about that? You find the first action you need to take in order to go towards your goal. And you decide when and where you're going to take that action. Now, if you identify that first action and when and where you're going to take it, you're much more likely to actually do that action. If you don't define when and where you're going to take that action, you're much less likely. You'll do it sometime, maybe next week, maybe next month. It's probably one of those things that's going to stay on your list for a long, long time. So identify when and where. Make clear what the first action is. Maybe the first action is to make a phone call. But really the first action is to get the contact information for the person you're going to call. So make sure you identify what the very first action is. Okay, so I'll get the contact information. I can do that tomorrow morning. And then I can make the call right then. Right when I get the contact information, I'll make that call. And there are certain times, there's some research done about judges, and Frank and I were talking about this yesterday, where certain times of day, they would give a better judgment for you if you were in court and you had to face the judge. First thing in the morning they gave the best results, and then right after lunch was a good time. Any other time, you're much less likely to get a good judgment. So first thing in the morning is often a good time to make those interactive kind of things, or right after lunch if first thing in the morning is too early for you. So you've identified the first step, when and where you're going to take it. And then in a lot of self-help books, they talk about seeing your goal, visualizing your goal, and imagining yourself having achieved that goal and experiencing what it would be like to have gotten there, to have achieved it, and you've accomplished it, and all the good feelings of having accomplished it, and wow, isn't that wonderful? Don't do that. Don't do that. The reason why is because if you do that, on some level, part of you feels like you've already done it. You get the satisfaction of already having accomplished that. And it takes some of your ambition away. It takes some of the energy and the motivation to actually reach that goal away. And that energy is important. You need that. It's the fuel that drives you. So when you enjoy what it's like to actually accomplish your goal before you've done it, you're undermining your process. So I'm sorry to all the authors of those self-help books, but It's a mistake. What you want to do instead is think of the steps that it's going to take you to reach your goal. Focus on those specific steps that it will take. Okay, you've identified the first step, but then think of what comes next and what comes after that. You might not have a clear road all the way to your goal yet, because things change and there's probably things that may interact. But as much as possible, focus on and imagine yourself doing the steps on the way to your goal. And as you do that, this is another thing that's crucial. If you remember two things, it's identify when and where you're going to start, and what I'm about to say now. Anticipate what will go wrong. Because often when we make plans towards our goals, we just assume that things are going to go like we imagine they're going to go. And then when they don't go that way, we get thrown off, and we get completely thrown off. And it derails our plans for a good long time. This happens a lot with diets. I don't recommend that you go on a diet. If you're wanting to change your diet, change to a healthy diet that you can maintain over a lifetime. But if you've decided to do that, it's going to happen that one day you're going to come to a wonderful buffet. Or, well, maybe your daughter loves baking, and all summer long what she wants to do is make cookies and cakes and pies, and you love what she does, and she's so delightful and so happy to make these. This is a personal experience. And here you're trying to eat a lot of fruits and veggies and really healthy stuff, and there's these wonderful cookies sitting there every dang day. And so what are you going to do? Well, if you haven't made plans for that, you're just going to eat the cookies because they're really good, and she's so adorable, and she's so delighted to have you. Okay, enough of that. If you have a plan for how to deal with when you get thrown off, then when you get thrown off, you can pop right back on. It doesn't take a lot of willpower, it doesn't take a lot of energy. You just pop back on track, and away you go. So that's a crucial thing. If you really want to be effective in reaching your goals, anticipate what will go wrong, make a strategy for getting back on track, and practice that in your mind several times. And then you can pop right back on. So, this might sound like a formula that I've given you. Okay, you do A, you do B, you do C, but it's really not. These are just elements that go into making positive change. But I really want to stress the process of change is unique to each one of us. It's a very, very personal matter. It's a very personal style that each of us has. And that's why we can see very obviously what somebody else needs to do but aren't doing, and wonder why they're not doing it. Well, they're not doing it because they're not you. And they have their own way of going about it. And so it's a very individualistic process. Even though you may be influenced by others, may be influenced by situations, it's very personal. And we're magnificent and bizarre, strange, flawed, wonderful, fascinating, complicated beings. And when I say bizarre and strange, I don't mean that in a pejorative. I mean that just kind of as a fact of life. If you were in anybody else's experience right now, you'd be pretty freaked out. Because we're also very different. We're just different. There's not a certain formula that works for everybody the same way. I've been working for 32 years with people, and I have yet to have anything like an identical case. Everybody is different. And so take these concepts, these ideas, and use them yourself. And tomorrow I'm going to talk about things, specific things that you can practice to make for yourself a happier life. But whatever your goals are, take these concepts and use them to build a happier life. Because it's up to each one of us to master and understand our own personal nature and to direct our energies towards the kind of life we want to live, the kind of positive changes we want to make, and to develop with our will the habits that will support us so that we don't have to use our will to counteract our habits. Thank you. And we have some time for questions.
Thank you. I enjoyed your talk very much. Do you have any recommendations if I wanted to take some kind of self-test to see what my temperament is? I know what I think my temperament is, but I'd like to see objectively what maybe it is. Can you recommend something?
I know that Chess and Thomas do have a questionnaire. I don't know if you'll email me, I will see if it's something that's available online. And I know it's available for psychologists to administer.
Okay.
But there is something that I would recommend, which is if you Google AuthenticHappiness.com. That's not the actual website, but that'll get you there. They have a series of questionnaires on there that are very, very interesting and useful. And one of them, if you scroll down to about 3/5 the way down, in the middle, you'll see the VIA Strengths Questionnaire. It's the Values and Actions Strengths Questionnaire. And it'll take you about 30-40 minutes to go through. And what it will do is it'll show you what your strengths are. And if you find the top 4 or 5 strengths and work with those strengths and develop those strengths, that's something that will strengthen your emotional and psychological foundation as well. But email me and I'll see if I can find that. But Chess and Thomas are the researchers. Yeah.
So you advise us to avoid visualizing success right now for what we hope for in the future.
Yeah.
I find myself doing the opposite, which is I am successful and I don't let it in. It's like I'll lose my edge if I do that. Sometimes I have to say, come on.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Do you have some comments about that?
Well, 2 things. One is it's important to take in what you've accomplished and to savor that, because that's a real positive thing. You've earned that. And the more you can take that in and appreciate it, you don't have to gloat about it, but the more you can take it in and appreciate it, that gives you a sense of joy and a sense of accomplishment. And it doesn't undermine your ambition necessarily unless you're done. If you've accomplished what you have and you don't really want to accomplish more, maybe it serves a purpose to not really take it in too much. So the other piece to that would be maybe identify something to aim for at this point. What are some goals you want to reach now? Identify those so you can take in what you've done, but see it as one step along the way. A friend of mine says the secret of a happy life is a long list. So it may be a matter of identifying some good goals to aim for, and then you can stand on your current achievements from that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's Chess and Thomas, C-H-E-S-S?
Yes.
All right, I'll look that up.
Yeah.
Like you, what you're doing is very much something I could not do, and I think I need to change my mindset there, to not be such an extreme introvert and make myself get up and speak.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about the kind of energy that is spoken of concerning willpower. That's used up if you're stressed, used up if you make decisions, if you use willpower. Is that really the same thing as Hans Selye's adaptation energy?
Well, it's actually physical energy. It's actually glucose in your bloodstream. And I mean, there's the cookie experiment, but they've done other experiments as well. So it's not just the cookies. It is a lowering of blood glucose level. That's part of why when people diet, they tend to lose, they have to use a lot of willpower to go on a diet. I don't mean changing your diet gradually over time, but when you go on a diet, you are using your will, and then at some point, your body feels like it's being starved, it's being deprived, and your glucose level goes down, and then it's much easier to say, oh, I'll just have those Twinkies, you know, or the cake or whatever, because your willpower has been depleted. So it's actual physical. It's not a California kind of energy, you know. It's a blood glucose level.
So so this could help explain sugar addiction and alcohol addiction.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And again, with alcohol, you're depleting the glucose level, even though it's a sugar. Your willpower also goes down when you drink a lot of alcohol. So.
I apologize if you covered this earlier. We had a metro issue, so we came in a little late. I find myself in conflict very often, especially the more I learn, on how to assess what I ought to accept and what I ought to improve. This is a much more expansive question than I actually expect you to answer. But what is a good place to start as far as what should we genuinely, like, how do we know what to genuinely improve upon and what to say, no, that's just me, that's okay?
Well, I would say if you have, if it's hurting you, that's something to look to change. If you feel like your life is being limited by it, that's something to look to change. If it's standing in the way of your goals or ambitions, that's something that you would want to change. If it's something like, I'm not that interested in learning foreign languages. It's not that important to me. I'd be nice, but it's not something I'm going to spend hundreds of hours at this point. It would have been nice if I had when I was younger, but it's not a high priority. So I would say, balance it against your priorities. But also, there may be things that you find that it's difficult to accept, and then the first step for that is to accept that you can't accept it. So yeah, I think this is true, but I'm not really willing to look at it right now. And I have to accept that that's where I am. I'm just not willing to look at it right now. And that will kind of get your foot in the door. And the next time you explore it, you might be willing to look at it. So you really step back and find what's true right now. Well, I may want to make this change, but I really don't have the motivation or the desire to actually make it right now. Everybody's telling me I should, but I'm not there right now. And accept that. And don't accept it in a way of, this is just me, you have to live with it. But accept that this is the truth for you at this moment, and be open to changing it in the future.